Hey guys, tonight we stand on a quiet patch of Earth and look up into a sky that seems so close you could almost believe it ends just above the rooftops, just beyond the last tree, just past the thin silver edge of the clouds. The stars look gentle from here, manageable, like a scattered little pattern placed there for your comfort. But hidden inside that soft view is a scale so large, so strangely calm, that it can make your whole day feel very small in the best possible way. Before you get cozy, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy spending time here with me. And if you feel like it, post your location and local time in the comments, because there is something quietly lovely about people across the world listening under different skies at the same moment. Let the world slow down for a moment. Let the fan murmur softly nearby, and let's slip into tonight's journey together. You begin in the most familiar place possible, which is here on the ground, inside a human-sized life. A room, a window, a road, a town that feels normal because you know where things are. The corner store is there. The noisy motorbike passes at the same hour. The same dog announces itself to the neighborhood as if it pays taxes. Everything feels close enough to belong to you, and Earth encourages that feeling. It gives you a horizon that looks flat from where you stand, even though the planet is curved. It gives you a sky that looks like a dome, even though there is no dome at all. It makes everything feel arranged around you very politely, which is charming, but also a little misleading. Because Earth is large to you, of course it is. Mountains look huge, oceans look endless. A long flight feels dramatic enough. Even crossing one city can feel like a complete emotional event depending on traffic. So your brain does what brains do. It builds a world out of your own scale, a useful world, a warm one, a world where a neighborhood is a place, a country is enormous, and the planet itself feels like the full stage. Then the night sky opens above that stage, and something begins to shift. You look up and see stars as points, just little bright pins in the dark. They seem almost modest from here, but the first quiet truth is that what looks small is often only far away, very far away. The sky is not crowded with tiny lights. It is spacious beyond comfort, filled with objects so distant that their brightness arrives thinned out, softened by unimaginable travel. Even the darkness between those lights is not empty in the simple way it appears. It is depth, real depth. Layer after layer of distance. And Earth, for all its storms and forests and cities and late-night fridge visits, is sitting inside that depth like something almost too small to mention. This is where the feeling becomes beautiful. You are on a planet about 12,700 kilometers across, which sounds big, and for daily life it absolutely is. More than enough planet for errands, bad decisions, and emotional growth. But compared with the wider structures around it, Earth is tiny. Not poetically tiny, actually tiny. If the Milky Way were reduced to the size of North America, Earth would vanish into the measurement problem before it even had a chance to feel important. You would not be looking for a grain of sand. You would be looking for a thing much smaller than that, a detail beneath the detail. And still, this very small world holds everything you have ever touched. That contrast is part of the calm. Earth is physically small, but experientially enormous. It contains childhood afternoons, rain on pavement, music in another room, people waiting for messages, and somebody somewhere right now tying their shoe without any awareness that they are standing on a moving ball of rock orbiting a star in a galaxy so large, it almost refuses to fit inside language. That person is doing fine, probably. The shoe is winning, but only slightly. From space, Earth becomes easier to understand and somehow harder to emotionally accept. Astronauts have described the planet as delicate, bright, thinly wrapped in atmosphere. That thin atmosphere matters more than it looks. The air you breathe, the weather you live under, the layer that scatters sunlight into blue and catches warmth close enough for oceans and clouds and birds and arguments about parking. All of it exists in a remarkably shallow shell around the planet. On a cosmic scale, it is almost nothing, a soft skin of gas, a fragile blur. If Earth were the size of an apple, the breathable atmosphere would be thinner than the skin. So even home, the sturdy place in your imagination, is more delicate than it seems. Keep that image nearby, because it matters soon. Underneath that skin is rock and iron and heat. Earth has a crust so thin compared with its full size that it resembles the dry outer layer of something still very much alive inside. Beneath the crust lies the mantle, deep and slow-moving over immense time, and deeper still the core, where metal sits under crushing pressure and extraordinary heat. This quiet world beneath your feet is not static. It is active. It turns. It shifts. It circulates heat. It generates a magnetic field that helps shield the surface from harmful charged particles arriving from space. Even the fact that compasses work at all is connected to deep, hidden motion inside the planet. Earth is not just a place. It is a process. And yet, inside the Milky Way, it is still barely anything in terms of size. That is the strange comfort of astronomy. It does not insult your life. It simply resizes the frame around it. If you imagine the Milky Way as a vast city of stars, Earth is not even one building. It is not one room in one building. It is something like a dust mote resting on a windowsill inside one apartment, circling one ordinary light somewhere in the outskirts. A very loved dust mote, to be fair. A dust mote with weather systems and whales and noodles and old songs. But still, the scale is rude, honestly, and also beautiful. The Milky Way contains hundreds of billions of stars. That number is so large it becomes sleepy in the mind if handled too roughly, so it helps to keep it gentle. Picture a beach. Then picture not one beach, but so many beaches that the grains stop feeling countable. Then let that image loosen, because even that does not quite get you there. Our galaxy is not a small collection. It is an enormous rotating structure of stars, gas, dust, dark matter, and time. And Earth is hidden so deeply inside one tiny part of it that, for most of human history, people did not even know what the Milky Way truly was. They saw it as a pale band across the sky, a milky river, a misty path, a blurred brightness overhead. Which makes sense, because that is what it looks like to human eyes under dark skies. But that pale band is not fog. It is the combined light of countless distant stars, flattened into a glowing lane because you are viewing the disk of our galaxy from within it. You are inside the thing you are trying to see. That is part of the trick. It is like trying to understand the size of a forest while standing between the trees. And all the while, Earth keeps spinning. You do not feel that spin. The planet turns at roughly 1,670 kilometers per hour at the equator, and yet the room feels still. The bed feels still. The cup on the table does not scoot dramatically into the wall. Everything moves together, so motion hides inside normality. The same is true on larger scales. Earth travels around the sun. The sun moves through the galaxy. The galaxy itself moves through space with its local group of galaxies. There is motion layered inside motion, all of it smooth enough that your evening can still include brushing your teeth and deciding whether one more snack is a terrible idea. This is what makes the cosmos feel almost polite. It carries out absurdly large events in perfect silence. So you look up at the stars again, and the sky begins to feel less like a ceiling and more like an opening. Earth becomes smaller without becoming lesser. That is important. Small does not mean meaningless. A page is small compared with a library, and still a single page can change a life. A lamp is small compared with a city, and still it lights the room you are actually in. Earth is small inside the Milky Way in the same way a heartbeat is small inside a body. Tiny in scale. essential in experience. And as your eyes settle into that thought, the galaxy above you starts to feel less like decoration and more like context. A vast and quiet context holding this tiny world in place, while you stand here for one brief human moment under the dark, listening to the soft machinery of night, beginning to sense just how far the frame extends beyond the little circle of home. That wider frame stays with you for a moment, and the planet beneath your feet starts to feel different. Not less real, not dreamlike, just more delicate than it did before, as if home has been quietly reduced to its true proportions. You still know it as continents and coastlines, cities lit like scattered embers, mountains standing with ancient confidence, oceans rolling with that deep, patient rhythm they have always had. But once you begin to see Earth in relation to the galaxy around it, even these immense features start to gather inside one smaller and stranger idea. Almost everything you love about this world happens in a very thin layer. That is one of the softest and oddest truths in astronomy. The place you call Earth feels enormous because you live pressed against its surface, and your days are measured in streets and rooms and weather and distance between one person and another. But the living part of Earth, the part that carries clouds, forests, birdsong, salt water, summer air, and the entire complicated performance of human life, is only a fine outer skin on a much larger ball of rock and metal. The oceans look vast, and they are vast to you. They cover most of the planet's surface and hold more depth than the human mind naturally enjoys thinking about at midnight. Even so, compared with the whole Earth, the oceans are astonishingly shallow. If you could smooth the entire planet into a perfectly even sphere, all the water on Earth would form only a very thin coating across it. It would not look like a deep flooded world. It would look more like a glossy film. The deepest trenches, terrifyingly dramatic on human maps, barely nick the surface compared with the full size of the planet. The same is true of mountains. Everest feels like the kind of thing the planet should brag about constantly. And to be fair, it is impressive. But placed against Earth's diameter, even Everest is tiny, more like a slight roughness than a serious spike. The continents themselves, which seem so immovable and grand, rest on a crust that is thin enough to feel almost impolite when you realize what lies below it. Under that crust, the mantle stretches downward for thousands of kilometers, hot and slow and under enormous pressure, moving on timescales that do not care at all about your calendar app. So the world you know best, the surface world of rain and stone and grass and lamp light through windows, exists on the uppermost edge of something much bigger and much deeper than it appears from a quiet afternoon walk. And then there is the air. You rarely think of the atmosphere as a physical object because you are inside it all the time, the way a fish does not spend much energy admiring the wetness. But the atmosphere is a real structure, layered and dynamic, held to the planet by gravity, constantly in motion. It carries heat from one place to another. It builds storms. It softens sunlight into dawn and evening. It gives the sky its blue color because molecules in the air scatter shorter wavelengths of light more easily than longer ones. That gentle blue overhead, the calmest ceiling in the human story, is a side effect of physics. And yet the atmosphere is startlingly thin. From the ground, the sky looks endless. From orbit, it does not. Astronaut photographs show Earth wrapped in a faint glowing line, a fragile blue edge tracing the planet like breath on glass. That line contains the air you breathe and the weather you live inside. It is so thin compared with Earth's full size that it almost feels temporary, which is a slightly rude thing for reality to reveal, but reality does enjoy understatement. The breathable lower atmosphere, where nearly all clouds and weather happen, is only a small fraction of the full radius of the planet. The part of the sky that matters most to your life is not some towering cosmic kingdom. It is a delicate film. Keep that image nearby too, because it changes the way you feel about home. You start to understand that your whole life has unfolded in a narrow zone, not just on one planet, but on one tiny outer layer of one planet. The birds fly in it. The rain falls through it. Airplanes cross it and feel very high, though on a planetary scale they are barely leaving the floor. Every conversation ever spoken, every fire ever lit, every song ever hummed under someone's breath while washing dishes has happened inside this wafer-thin region between rock and space. And space begins so quietly. That may be one of the strangest parts. There is no giant wall, no dramatic cosmic curtain. The atmosphere simply thins and thins until it becomes less like air and more like almost nothing. The transition is gradual. The ground feels secure, the lower sky feels generous, and then above that the world fades into the black surrounding ocean of the universe with almost no ceremony at all. Earth does not sit under a lid. It sits exposed, wrapped in a soft layer so slender that from far enough away it is barely visible. Which means everything familiar is compressed into a surprisingly small package. Your favorite season, tiny layer. The smell of soil after rain, tiny layer. Cities, forests, rivers, warm coastlines, cold mornings, crowded markets, silent villages, all of it resting on a thin crust under a thin atmosphere on a planet that already looked small in the last part of the journey. And this is before the galaxy has even properly entered the room. It helps to think of Earth less as a giant world and more as a carefully finished object. A sphere with a hot interior, a rocky shell, a little water on top, a little air above that, and life hanging on right at the edge where conditions happen to be gentle enough. That edge is where you are. You are not living deep inside the bulk of Earth. You are living on the cool boundary between the interior heat below and the open universe above. Almost like moss on a stone, if the moss had invented satellites and unnecessarily complicated passwords. There is comfort in that image because it makes life feel precious without making it feel doomed. Precise, not fragile in a dramatic way. Rarely placed, quietly protected. Earth has gravity strong enough to hold its atmosphere, a magnetic field that helps shield it from charged particles from the sun, liquid water at the surface, and temperatures that allow chemistry to become weather, weather to become ecosystems, and ecosystems to become the long layered story that eventually produced you listening here in the dark. That whole story sits on the outside. And once you really feel that, once you picture oceans as a skin, mountains as texture, the atmosphere as a blue whisper, the human world as a thin, bright living trace on the outer shell of a small planet, Earth begins to shrink again, not emotionally but spatially, honestly. It becomes a place you can hold in the imagination all at once. Not every detail, of course, but the structure of it. A globe, a surface, a narrow habitable band, a home small enough to travel within thought. That shift matters because the Milky Way is not interested in your local sense of scale. It does not treat Earth as the main character. The galaxy does not even treat the whole planet as a meaningful unit of size. Earth is too small for that. The layer where all known life exists is smaller still. So when you look up into the night and feel the quiet rising from those distant stars, you are not just looking out from a planet. You are looking out from a thin inhabited surface on a small rocky world. A very fine place, a very beautiful place, but physically only a speck, carrying its little shell of air and water through a darkness so large that even this whole planet, with all its oceans and mountains and midnight thoughts, will soon begin to feel like just the first tiny detail in a much greater map. That greater map begins with something you know so well that it can almost disappear through familiarity. Every morning it brightens your room without asking permission. Every afternoon it throws sharp shadows across the ground. Every evening it turns windows golden for a few brief minutes and then slips away as if it has somewhere else important to be, which, to be fair, it does. The sun feels local, personal, even. It is part of the daily furniture of life. You wake under its light, complain about its heat, admire it through leaves, forget what it really is and carry on. But Earth is not simply sitting under sunlight. Earth is traveling around its source. That quiet fact already changes the mood. The planet that felt like a stage in the first moments of this journey, and then a thin shell of life in the last one, is also a moving world, circling one star in a wide, steady path. You are not resting in place. You are riding an orbit. And the sun itself, for all its authority in the sky, is not a giant by the standards of the universe. It is a fairly ordinary star. Beautiful, powerful, essential to you, yes, but not some cosmic emperor seated at the center of everything. More like a very reliable middle manager of thermonuclear fusion. It does its work, keeps the system warm, and minds its business. The sun holds about 99.8% of the mass in the solar system. That means nearly everything else, all the planets, moons, asteroids, comets, dust, and icy debris, amounts to a very small leftover share. So when you picture the solar system, it helps to picture the sun as the true anchor, the dominant body around which everything else moves. Earth is one of those moving bodies, a rocky planet circling at an average distance of about 150 million kilometers. That number is too large to feel by itself, so it helps to soften it. Light, which moves faster than anything with mass can move, takes a little over 8 minutes to travel from the sun to Earth. The warmth on your skin, the morning brightness on a wall, the glow caught in a glass of water, all of it left the sun more than 8 minutes ago. Even sunlight takes its time. Keep that nearby, because it gives the whole system a slower, gentler rhythm. Earth completes one orbit in about 365.25 days, which is why calendars need the occasional leap year to keep up with reality's quiet insistence on fractions. The orbit is not a perfect circle. It is slightly elliptical, though not enough to make the seasons the way people sometimes imagine. Seasons happen mostly because Earth is tilted on its axis by about 23.5 degrees. That tilt changes how sunlight falls across the planet over the course of the year. So summer and winter are not simply a matter of being closer to or farther from the sun. They are a matter of angle, of light arriving more directly or more gently, of days stretching or shortening, depending on where you live. It is a lovely piece of physics, really. The shape of your year is written partly in a lean. And all the while, Earth is moving through space at roughly 30 kilometers per second in its orbit around the sun. That is about 108,000 kilometers per hour. You do not feel it. Your chair does not vibrate with cosmic speed. Your tea does not slosh toward one side of the cup in protest. Motion, when shared smoothly, disappears into normal life. So you can spend an entire afternoon deciding what to eat while your planet races around a star at a speed that would seem outrageous in any other context. This is one of the quiet miracles of astronomy. The grandest motions are often the least noticeable. The sun, seen closely in the mind rather than casually in the sky, is a sphere of hot plasma about 1.39 million kilometers wide. More than 100 Earths could fit across its diameter. More than 1 million Earths could fit inside its volume. That comparison is not meant to make Earth feel silly. It just places things in their proper proportions. The planet you know as oceans and weather and continents is physically tiny next to the star it depends on. And still, the sun is only one star. Its energy comes from nuclear fusion in the core, where hydrogen atoms are pressed together under enormous pressure and temperature until they fuse into helium, releasing energy in the process. That energy begins deep inside the sun and can take a very long time to work its way outward through the dense interior. Photons do not travel in a straight heroic dash from the core to the surface. They are scattered and absorbed and re-emitted again and again in a slow, chaotic shuffle. In a way, even light has paperwork to get through. By the time energy finally escapes the solar surface and heads into space, it then crosses the emptiness to Earth in those swift 8 minutes. So the sunlight touching your face has a surprisingly long history behind it. The sun also shapes the space around it. It sends out a stream of charged particles called the solar wind, flowing outward through the solar system and carving out a protective bubble in interstellar space known as the heliosphere. Earth travels within that bubble, wrapped in the influence of its star. This matters because the sun is not just a lamp in the sky. It is the gravitational center, the energy source, and the local architect of the environment through which the planets move. And Earth, faithful little traveler that it is, circles within this domain in the narrow region where liquid water can exist at the surface. Not too close for the oceans to boil away, not too far for them to freeze over completely. That region is often described as habitable, though the word can sound a bit neat for something so delicate and variable. What matters is that Earth occupies a distance where sunlight and atmospheric conditions allow water to remain liquid across much of the surface. That single fact touches almost everything. Rivers, rain, clouds, seas, cells, forests, blood, tears, soup. A suspicious amount of life is basically water with opinions. And because Earth is one planet among several, its place becomes even clearer when you glance at its neighbors. Mercury is closer to the Sun, battered by extreme temperatures and almost no atmosphere. Venus is wrapped in thick clouds and a brutal greenhouse effect. Mars is cold and dry, with a thin atmosphere and old riverbeds that suggest a different past. The outer planets are larger and stranger, gas giants and ice giants with no solid surface like Earth's familiar ground. So Earth is not simply any planet. It is one rocky world in a particular orbit around an ordinary star, under a set of conditions that happen to be unusually kind. That kindness is quiet, easy to miss, the sort of thing you only notice after stepping back. And once you do step back, Earth becomes smaller again, because the whole orbit, the full path of the planet around the Sun, starts to feel like a modest curve inside a much larger system. 1 year of your life is one lap. Birthday after birthday, season after season, all marked by the simple fact that your small world has circled its star once more. Your memories are orbital records whether you think of them that way or not. This birthday, one orbit later. That summer, several orbits ago. That childhood afternoon, many circuits back, sunlight falling at a familiar angle while Earth kept gliding onward without a sound. There is something comforting in that repetition. The orbit holds, the star rises, the planet turns. Life gathers its meaning inside those motions. But already you can feel the scale shifting under your feet again, because even this entire arrangement, the star at the center, the planets in their paths, the long sweep of Earth's year, is still only the local neighborhood around one ordinary sun. And beyond that neighborhood, the dark is waiting with more distance than the human mind naturally likes to carry all at once, where even the space between nearby stars begins to stretch the idea of home into something far quieter and far more immense. That wider dark waits just beyond the sun's immediate company, and as your sense of scale adjusts again, the solar system begins to unfold not as a neat classroom diagram, but as a place with surprising emptiness between its members. Planets in pictures always look so close together, lined up like polite little ornaments, each one ready for inspection. Real space is far less tidy. Real space leaves room, a great deal of room, more room than your instincts want there to be. You drift outward from Earth's orbit and begin to feel that spaciousness almost at once. The moon, which seems so present in the sky, is already far enough away that light takes just over a second to travel between it and Earth. That sounds brief until you remember that light is absurdly fast. If even light needs a moment to make the trip, then the distance is real. Human closeness ends very quickly once the solar system enters the conversation. Beyond Earth lies Mars, sometimes friendly in the imagination, sometimes lonely, always farther than it looks in clean illustrations. Its rusty color comes from iron-rich dust and rock, and its surface holds dry valleys, ancient river channels, giant volcanoes, and polar ice. It is a world with a past you can almost feel. There are hints that liquid water once moved more freely there, long ago, under a thicker atmosphere. That little detail has a soft pull to it. A planet now cold and spare may once have been more open to flowing water and perhaps to the chemistry that likes to gather around it. Keep that quiet possibility nearby, because it says something important about how conditions can change, even close to home. Between Mars and Jupiter lies the asteroid belt, which sounds dramatic enough to make people imagine a chaotic obstacle course of tumbling rocks waiting to destroy a spaceship in an expensive movie. Realistically, it is much calmer than that. The asteroids are spread across a vast region, and most of the space between them is empty, very empty. You could pass through much of the belt without seeing anything nearby at all, which is classic space, honestly. It hears your expectation of crowding and responds with more silence. Still, the asteroid belt matters. These rocky bodies are leftovers from the early solar system, pieces of material that never merged into a full planet, partly because Jupiter's enormous gravity kept stirring things up. Some are metallic, some rocky, some rich in carbon. They are relics, small records from a time when the sun was younger and the planets were still assembling themselves out of dust, ice, and collision after collision. So even debris out here carries memory. The solar system keeps its history scattered around like a house that never fully cleaned up after moving in. Then comes Jupiter, and the scale changes all over again. Jupiter is so large that it almost feels unfair to compare it with Earth directly. More than 11 Earths could fit across its diameter. Over 1,000 Earths could fit inside its volume, though because it is made mostly of hydrogen and helium, its density is much lower than a rocky planet, S. It is not a larger version of Earth. It is a different kind of world entirely. A giant planet with no solid surface in the familiar sense, wrapped in deep atmosphere, powerful storms, intense radiation belts, and a magnetic field so vast it would dwarf the sun in the sky if human eyes could see magnetic structure. That is a wonderfully unnecessary mental image, but a good one. The Great Red Spot, that huge storm turning in Jupiter's atmosphere, has lasted for centuries. Winds there move faster than most storms on Earth could ever dream of. Jupiter's cloud bands, its many moons, its gravity, all of it gives the solar system a sense of layered architecture. This is not just a star with a few stones around it. It is a system with hierarchy, inner rocky worlds, a belt of remnants, a giant planet dominating the middle distance. And Jupiter is not alone. Saturn waits farther out, quieter in color but somehow even more dreamlike to the human imagination. Its rings look delicate from afar, almost decorative, as if the universe briefly tried elegance for the sheer pleasure of it. But those rings are made of countless particles, from fine icy grains to larger chunks, each one orbiting Saturn according to gravity and motion, each one catching sunlight in its own way. From a distance, the rings appear smooth. Up close, they are structure and detail, and countless separate pieces moving together, which is a nice little reminder that beauty often comes from large numbers behaving politely. Saturn itself is another gas giant, vast and windy and less dense than you might expect. If you could somehow lower it into an ocean large enough, Saturn would float, which is such an outrageous fact that it sounds made up, but density is a strange thing, and the universe enjoys slipping surreal details into otherwise respectable physics. Of course, there is no ocean remotely large enough for that demonstration, so Saturn remains mercifully spared the indignity. Farther still are Uranus and Neptune, colder and darker and quieter in the imagination, mostly because they sit so far from the sun that sunlight is weaker there, stretched thin across distance. Uranus rotates on its side, tipped by about 98 degrees, as if some ancient collision left it permanently unwilling to participate in the usual posture of planets. Neptune, deeper blue and farther out, is a world of fierce winds and internal energy, a cold place that still manages remarkable atmospheric motion. The outer planets show you that distance from the sun does not produce simple stillness. The solar system remains active, textured, and strained, even in its colder reaches. And yet, for all this richness, all this variety, the solar system is still mostly emptiness. The planets are tiny compared with the distances between them. The sun dominates the center, but its light grows thinner as you move outward. By the time you reach Neptune, sunlight is faint compared with what pours over Earth. Day exists there, but with a dimmer mood, as though the sun has become less a presence and more a bright reminder of where home used to be. Beyond Neptune lies the Kuiper Belt, another broad region of icy bodies and dwarf planets, including Pluto, which continues to occupy a strangely emotional corner of the human heart. Pluto is small, cold, and distant, but not uninteresting. It has mountains of water ice, plains of frozen nitrogen, and a heart-shaped region on its surface that feels almost offensively poetic for an object living in such remote darkness. The Kuiper Belt is populated by these frozen leftovers, material from the outer solar system that never quite gathered into major planets. More archives, more remnants, more evidence that small things matter. And beyond even that, far beyond the major planetary orbits, there may be the Oort cloud, a vast spherical reservoir of icy bodies extending perhaps tens of thousands of astronomical units from the sun. It is difficult to picture because it is not a neat ring or a tidy disk. It is more like a distant shell of potential comets, loosely bound to the sun, marking the outermost whisper of the solar system's gravitational reach. If the planets are the furnished rooms of home, the Oort cloud is the cold edge of the property line, where your backyard fades into the unlit land beyond. That is the feeling settling in now. The solar system is not a compact set of neighboring worlds. It is a broad and sparse domain centered on one star, rich in detail, but stretched across such enormous distance that even its outer members live in long, quiet isolation. Earth, which seemed small beside the sun, now seems smaller still when held against the full spread of the solar system. Your planet is one rocky orbit in the inner region of a stellar household that extends far into dark, cold space. And even this entire household, all the planets, moons, belts, comets, dust, and icy fringes, remains only a local arrangement around a single ordinary star. The next step outward is where perspective becomes even gentler and more severe at once, because the dark between stars is not just large. It is where the idea of neighborhood begins to dissolve. That feeling of the property line fading away stays with you as the solar system loosens its grip, and what comes next is not another planet, not another icy belt, not some convenient marker floating in the dark with a sign that says the neighborhood begins here. What comes next is distance itself, stretched into a calmer and more difficult form. Because the nearest star beyond the sun is not sitting just outside the outer planets, waiting politely in the next lane. It is far beyond them, far beyond the Kuiper Belt, far beyond the imagined shell of the Oort cloud. Even after you leave the last scattered traces of the solar system's influence, you are still nowhere near the next star. The gap between stars is not a gap in the casual sense. It is a gulf. The nearest known star system to us is Alpha Centauri, and one of its members, Proxima Centauri, is the closest individual star to the Sun. Its light takes a little over 4 years to reach Earth. That is what a light year means. The distance light travels in 1 year, and it helps to handle that gently because the number itself is almost too large to be useful on first contact. Light moves at about 300,000 kilometers per second. It can circle Earth more than 7 times in 1 second. And even that astonishing speed still needs more than 4 years to travel from Proxima to you. So when you look at a nearby star, you are looking across time as well as distance. That fact changes the mood in a very quiet way. The night sky is not just a ceiling of lights. It is a layered field of old messages arriving on delay. Some starlight began its trip before you woke up this morning, some before you were born, some before there were cities in their modern shape, before airplanes, before electric light, before any human being knew what a galaxy truly was. The stars are not merely far away. They are patient. Keep that patience nearby, because it helps the scale settle softly instead of all at once. You might imagine that once you leave the solar system, you enter a crowded sea of stars, each one shining near the next. But the truth is gentler and emptier than that. Stars in our region of the Milky Way are widely spaced. The Sun's nearest stellar neighbors are still separated by trillions of kilometers. If the Sun were reduced to the size of a small orange, the nearest star in that scale model would not be sitting on the next table. It would be thousands of kilometers away. The galaxy is full of stars, yes, but it spreads them across an enormous volume. Even the star crowd has room to breathe. That is one reason the night sky can feel so calm. It is not cluttered. It is spacious. Every point of light has had to cross an enormous private darkness to be seen. Our Sun lives in a local stellar neighborhood sometimes called the solar neighborhood, a modest region of the Milky Way containing stars of different ages, sizes, colors, and temperaments. Some are red dwarfs, small and cool compared with the Sun, and these are actually the most common stars in the galaxy. They burn slowly and can live for extraordinarily long times, far longer than stars like the Sun. Others are larger, brighter, hotter, and shorter-lived, spending their energy with much less restraint. There are white dwarfs too, the dense leftover cores of stars that once resembled the Sun more closely and have already finished their ordinary lives. So even near home, the galaxy is not uniform. It is a neighborhood of variety. Proxima Centauri, that nearest known star, is a red dwarf. Small, dim by stellar standards, easy to miss if it were not so close in cosmic terms. It reminds you of something important. The nearest things in space are not always the brightest or grandest. Sometimes they are quiet. Sometimes they are modest objects whose significance comes from proximity rather than spectacle, which is strangely human of the universe, really. Then there is Sirius, the brightest star in Earth's night sky, not because it is the largest possible kind of star, but because it is relatively nearby and intrinsically luminous. There is Vega, crisp and blue-white. Arcturus, warmer in color, older in feeling somehow. Betelgeuse, farther away and enormous. A red supergiant with a scale so great that if it replaced the Sun, its outer layers would stretch out past the orbit of Mars, perhaps even farther depending on how you define its changing outer atmosphere. That comparison is not there to make Earth nervous. It simply shows that the stars are not one-size objects. They range from quiet little embers to giants of almost theatrical dimensions. And still, Even the largest single stars are just individual residents inside a much greater structure. You begin to notice something else too. The constellations that seem so neat from Earth are mostly visual accidents. Their stars are not gathered into flat patterns like decorations pinned to the same surface. They only appear arranged because you are seeing them from one specific location. In three-dimensional space, the stars of a constellation can be at very different distances from you and from one another. Orion looks beautifully assembled in the sky, but its stars are not standing shoulder to shoulder in any simple way. The pattern belongs to your perspective. That is a very tender truth. Some of what feels solid in the sky is simply the shape made by where you happen to be. And where you happen to be is on a tiny planet around one average star in a region of the galaxy that is not especially central, not especially crowded, not especially dramatic. Just one place among many. The sun moves relative to nearby stars, and those stars move too, all orbiting the center of the Milky Way according to their own paths and speeds. The constellations themselves will slowly change over vast stretches of time. The sky, you know, is not permanent. It is a temporary arrangement, calm enough to feel eternal, but only because human lives are short. Even within our local neighborhood, the distances are so large that spacecraft become almost heartbreakingly slow. Voyager 1, one of the most distant human-made objects, has been traveling outward for decades and is only beginning to move through interstellar space. It has not gone far compared with the scale between stars. If it were aimed toward Proxima Centauri, it would take tens of thousands of years to arrive. Human engineering is remarkable, but the galaxy remains unimpressed by speed unless light is involved. This is where Earth shrinks again, not because something is threatening it, but because the setting around it becomes so much wider. Your whole solar system, which already felt enormous from the inside, turns into a tiny local arrangement suspended between other tiny local arrangements, each centered on its own star. The sun becomes one light among many. Earth becomes not even a point of light on that scale. Just one unseen world tucked into the orbit of one unremarkable star in a quiet stellar suburb. And yet that does not make the world feel empty. It makes it feel textured, populated, deep. The Milky Way is not just a backdrop. It is full of individual suns, some with planets, some likely with rocky worlds, some perhaps with moons under distant skies, all separated by darkness and time, all sharing the same galactic home without ever coming close enough to crowd one another. You can feel the proportions changing in your mind now. Earth was once the whole stage. Then it became a thin, inhabited shell. Then one planet among several. Then one orbit around one star. And now even that star is only one small lamp among neighbors scattered across a dark so broad and patient that the very idea of distance has started to soften into something more like atmosphere. The local stars do not end the wonder. They prepare it. Because once you see how far even the nearest stars are, you are ready for the next realization, the one that places this entire little stellar neighborhood inside a single larger shape. A galaxy with structure, motion, and boundaries so vast that the sun's familiar circle of light begins to look like a single quiet address on an almost impossibly large street. That enormous street begins to reveal its outline only when you stop thinking of the stars as scattered points and start thinking of them as members of one vast structure. The night sky does not look like a galaxy from where you stand. It looks like darkness with lights pinned into it. And for most of human history, that was more than enough to inspire stories, calendars, prayers, and the occasional very confident wrong idea. But the Milky Way is not a random spray. It is shape. It has thickness and rotation and crowded regions and quieter regions. It has a kind of architecture, though not the tidy kind you would trust with your house keys. From a dark place on Earth, far from city glow, the Milky Way appears as a pale band stretching across the sky, cloudy and uneven, brighter in some places, darker in others where dust blocks the light behind it. That soft river of brightness is the name-bearing clue. You are seeing the disk of our galaxy from inside the disk itself. You are not outside it, looking down at a neat spiral the way astronomy posters do. You are inside the thing, embedded in one of its quieter parts, trying to infer the whole shape from a sideways view. It is a bit like realizing you live in a forest by studying the pattern of trunks around you. That is why it took time for human beings to understand what the Milky Way really is. To the naked eye, it looks like glow. Through telescopes, that glow breaks apart into countless stars. That was the first great softening of the illusion. The galaxy stopped being mist and became population. And population, on a very large scale, begins to form structure. The Milky Way is a barred spiral galaxy. That means it has a flattened disk with spiral arms winding outward, and a central bar-shaped concentration of stars crossing the core region. If you could step far outside it and look back from a safe, impossible distance, you would see a broad, luminous disk, somewhat like a whirlpool that had slowed down and learned patience. The spiral arms would not appear as solid, rigid bands like grooves carved into metal. They are more like denser traffic lanes of stars, gas, and dust, regions where material gathers and star formation tends to be more active. The galaxy is not a frozen pinwheel. It is alive with motion. Its diameter is often estimated at roughly 100,000 light-years, perhaps a bit more depending on how you define its outer regions. That number is so large it behaves badly in the imagination, so it helps to translate it into a feeling rather than a precise mental map. Light, moving at the fastest speed available to the universe, would still need about 100,000 years to cross the main disk from one side to the other. Not a train, not a probe, not a very optimistic intern with a flashlight, light itself. So when you ask how small Earth is inside the Milky Way, the answer is not merely small. It is almost beneath the category of size once the full galactic frame appears. The disk of the Milky Way is not equally thick everywhere. It is much wider than it is tall, like a thin cosmic city spread across an enormous plain. The central regions bulge outward, crowded with older stars, while the disk farther out remains comparatively thin. Above and below the disk sits a more diffuse halo, containing old stars, globular clusters, and the larger invisible influence of dark matter, which does not shine but does contribute gravity. That hidden gravity matters because the galaxy rotates in a way that visible matter alone cannot fully explain. Something unseen adds mass to the system. Dark matter is our best current description of that missing influence, and while its exact nature remains unsettled, its effect is written into the movement of galaxies. It is one of those lovely cosmic details where the universe calmly admits there is more going on than you can directly see. The spiral arms themselves are not permanent lines of the same stars marching together forever. Stars orbit the galactic center at different speeds and distances, while the spiral pattern behaves more like a wave of higher density moving through the disk. Gas enters these denser regions, becomes compressed, and can help trigger the birth of new stars. That is why spiral arms are often rich in young bright stars and glowing clouds of gas. They are places where the galaxy still does some of its visible work. The Milky Way is not simply storing stars, it is continuing to make them. And between those arms are quieter stretches, not empty, but less crowded, less theatrically lit. Home, as it happens, is in one of those more modest regions. We will come back to that quiet little detail soon, because it matters more than it first seems. The center of the galaxy is a different world entirely from the place where the sun lives. It is denser, brighter, more energetic, filled with older stars, gas clouds, strong gravitational influences, and at its heart, a supermassive black hole called Sagittarius A. That black hole contains about 4 million times the mass of the sun. It does not sit there like some dramatic cosmic vacuum cleaner swallowing the galaxy whole. Black holes are rude in many ways, but they are not magical. If the sun were somehow replaced by a black hole of equal mass, Earth would keep orbiting almost the same way, though the lighting situation would become genuinely inconvenient. What matters in the galactic center is not just the black hole itself, but the concentration of mass around that region. The inner galaxy is busier, denser, and less gentle than our local neighborhood. Which means the sun is not merely in the galaxy. It is in a relatively calm district of the galaxy. That calmness starts to feel like a gift. The Milky Way contains hundreds of billions of stars, along with vast clouds of gas and dust, star clusters, remnants of exploded stars, wandering planets, magnetic fields, radiation, and the great gravitational choreography that keeps the whole system rotating. The sun orbits the center of this galaxy, carrying Earth and the rest of the solar system with it. One complete orbit, sometimes called a cosmic year, takes on the order of 225 to 250 million Earth years. So dinosaurs lived under a different galactic sky position than you do, not because the stars changed in one lifetime, but because the whole solar system has been slowly circling the Milky Way for immense spans of time. That means your ordinary calendar sits inside a much older calendar you never feel directly. January, February, March, all very nice. Then millions of years pass, and the sun has moved a little farther around the galactic center. It is a deeply humbling layering of time. And all through that vast rotation, Earth remains what it has been shrinking into all night, a tiny inhabited surface on a small rocky planet orbiting one ordinary star inside one spiral galaxy. Not in the center, not in the thickest crowd, not placed on a pedestal, just carried along in one outer region of a barred spiral so wide that the entire human story occupies only the briefest flicker on one invisible speck within it. The more clearly the Milky Way takes shape, the smaller Earth becomes, and yet the gentler the feeling gets, because structure brings calm. Once the galaxy stops being abstract immensity and becomes a real place with a disk and arms and a center and a slow rotation, you can begin to locate home inside it. You can begin to ask the quieter question, the one that matters after scale has done its work. Where exactly inside all this are you? That question settles very gently once the galaxy has a shape. You are not simply somewhere in the Milky Way. You are in a very particular place, far from the crowded core, far from the dramatic center where stars gather more densely, and gravity becomes less relaxed about personal space. The sun lives out in the galactic disk, roughly halfway to a little beyond halfway from the center, depending on how you measure the edge and how exact you want to be with a structure that does not come with clean property lines. A good working picture is this. If the Milky Way were a great luminous city, the sun would not live downtown. It would not even live in the fashionable inner district where everything is bright and loud and impossible to park in. It would live farther out, in a quieter neighborhood, one of those calm suburban stretches where there is still plenty happening, but not so much that the place forgets how to breathe. That turns out to matter. The sun is about 26,000 light-years from the galactic center, give or take a little depending on the model. Again, light itself would need about 26,000 years to cover that distance. So when you imagine the galaxy, do not picture us near the bright central bulge. We are well outside it, orbiting in the disk. Not on the extreme rim, not tucked against the very last scattered stars, but comfortably out in the broader spiral structure, away from the deepest crowding. It is a strangely balanced address, not central, not remote, quiet but not empty. And even more specifically, the Sun appears to sit in a small spiral feature often called the Orion Arm, or Orion Spur, a minor arm or branch between two larger spiral arms named Sagittarius and Perseus. That detail is lovely because it makes our location sound modest, which it is. We are not in one of the grand headline spiral arms with the most dramatic names and the most obvious prestige. We are in a smaller side structure, a kind of galactic side street, which is rude to the ego, yes, but excellent for sleep. Keep that image nearby, a side street in a galaxy. It means that when you step outside at night and look up, you are not looking from the center of the Milky Way outward. You are looking from an off-center position from within one quieter spiral region across the disk and through it. That is why the Milky Way's band appears brighter in some directions than others. Toward the center, the sky thickens with stars and dust and glow. In the opposite direction, toward the outer galaxy, the star fields thin out. The difference is not imaginary, it is geography. Galactic geography, which sounds like a course you would sign up for out of curiosity, and then immediately regret when the distances begin. Still, those distances bring a calm kind of orientation. The Sun completes one orbit around the galactic center in roughly 230 million years, maybe a little more or less depending on the exact speed and distance you choose. That means every moment of your life happens while the solar system is following this vast, slow path through the Milky Way. Earth's yearly orbit around the Sun is the local clock. The Sun's journey around the galaxy is the deeper one underneath it. 1 year feels meaningful to you because it shapes seasons and memory. 230 million years is too large for your life to hold directly, but not too large for wonder. The strange comfort is that you are not lost in all this. You are located. You have an address, even if it is written in impossible units. A small planet, around an ordinary star, in the Orion Spur, about 26,000 light-years from the center of the Milky Way, orbiting once every few 100 million years. That is home. And what kind of home is it? Surprisingly calm by galactic standards. The inner galaxy is more crowded with stars. Stars closer together can mean more gravitational disturbances over long timescales, more radiation from energetic events, more general cosmic busyness. Out where the Sun lives, the spacing is roomier. The environment is quieter. There are still supernovae, still passing clouds of gas and dust, still the great background activity of a living galaxy, but the neighborhood seems relatively gentle, not perfectly serene. This is still a galaxy, not a monastery, but gentle enough. That relative calm may have helped Earth remain stable over the long spans needed for complex life to develop. It is one of those delicate ideas in astronomy and astrobiology that is discussed with care, because galaxies are not neatly divided into friendly and unfriendly zones, and life may be more adaptable than we once assumed. But broadly speaking, there is a concept sometimes called the galactic habitable zone, the idea that some regions of a galaxy may be more favorable to long-term planetary stability and life than others. Too close to the center, and conditions may be harsher in several ways. Too far out, and there may be fewer heavy elements needed to build rocky planets and complex chemistry. Somewhere between those extremes, quieter neighborhoods may offer a better balance. Whether or not that idea ends up being drawn very precisely, the feeling behind it is gentle and important. Earth may not just be on a habitable planet. It may also sit in a fairly hospitable part of its galaxy. That is a very tender kind of luck. And it makes Earth seem smaller in a more intimate way. Not just small in size, but small in placement. Hidden almost, tucked away. Your whole world is not displayed in the grand center of the Milky Way like a jewel under a spotlight. It is sheltered in a quieter lane, moving through the galaxy without announcement. The sun does not blaze as some singular beacon visible across all structure. It joins the enormous population of ordinary stars going about their long orbital business. This changes how the sky feels. When you look toward the bright band of the Milky Way, especially from a truly dark place, you are seeing home from inside the neighborhood. You are seeing the galaxy edge on, its dust lanes like soft shadows across the star fields, its brighter regions hinting at denser populations beyond. The center lies in one direction, richer and more crowded, while the outer disk stretches away in another. And all of it contains the sun, as one almost forgettable light among hundreds of billions. Earth is smaller than that light, by an almost insulting margin. Earth does not shine on the scale of stars. It reflects sunlight. It whispers. If you were far enough away, even the sun would blend into the countless stars of the Milky Way, and Earth would vanish entirely from unaided sight. Not hidden by drama, hidden by scale. That is the key mood tonight. The world is not tiny because it has failed to matter. It is tiny because the galaxy is so extravagantly large that ordinary categories of importance stop being spatial ones. A lullaby is small too. So is a hand on your shoulder. So is the warm square of light on the floor before dawn. Size is not the same thing as meaning. Still, the physical smallness is worth holding clearly. Because once you really see where the sun is located, far from the center, in a minor spiral structure, one star in a suburban stretch of a barred spiral galaxy, then Earth becomes not only a planet in a galaxy, but a nearly invisible world in a very ordinary corner of one. A hidden address in a place so large that even our whole solar system is less like a landmark and more like a private room with the curtains drawn. And from there, the next shift becomes possible, because once you know where Earth is hidden, you can begin to feel how astonishingly small smallness becomes when you compare the planet, the sun, and even the full solar system to the actual dimensions of the Milky Way itself. That comparison begins very quietly, because the mind needs a moment to loosen its grip on ordinary scale. You have already watched Earth become a surface, then a planet, then one orbit around one star, then one hidden address in a quiet spur of the Milky Way. But there is still one more soft collapse of proportion waiting here, and it happens when you stop asking where Earth is and start asking how much room it actually takes up inside the galaxy. The answer is so small that the imagination almost tries to reject it out of self-defense. Earth by itself is tiny next to the sun. That much already settled into place earlier. More than 1 million Earths could fit inside the sun by volume, and yet the sun is only one ordinary star among hundreds of billions in the Milky Way. So the first gentle reduction is this: the planet that holds every city, every ocean, every storm, every memory you have ever had, does not even begin to compare with the size of the star it circles. Then comes the second reduction. The distance from Earth to the sun, one astronomical unit, feels large to us because it is the scale that defines our local life in space. It takes light a little over 8 minutes to cross it. Spacecraft spend months traveling across pieces of that distance. Human beings treat it with great seriousness, and reasonably so. But inside the galaxy, that Earth-Sun distance is almost nothing. It is a local spacing, a private measurement inside one small household. Even the whole visible planetary system, all the main orbits out through Neptune, is still just a tiny knot around the sun compared with the distance to the nearest stars. And once you place even those nearest stars into the wider disk of the Milky Way, the solar system itself begins to seem less like a structure and more like a point with extra detail no one can see from far away. That is the moment where smallness becomes almost strangely elegant. It helps to build the scale in layers. If the sun were reduced to the size of a grain of sand, Earth would be smaller still, almost too tiny to picture, circling nearby at a short distance in that model. The whole solar system of planets would remain a delicate arrangement around that grain. But the Milky Way, at the same scale, would still be enormous, stretching across a space so broad that your little grain star and its nearly invisible planet would disappear into the problem of where to even begin looking. You would not need a better map. You would need a different relationship with size. The galaxy is about 100,000 light-years across. A light-year is already an immense unit, far beyond anything the body can naturally feel. Earth's diameter is around 12,700 kilometers. A light-year is about 9.46 trillion kilometers. So Earth compared with a light-year is already vanishingly small. And the Milky Way is not 1 light-year wide, but 100,000 of them, with the Sun sitting far from the center in one modest region of the disk, and Earth tucked into one tiny orbit around that star. At some point, the numbers stop behaving like numbers and start behaving like weather in the mind. You do not calculate them so much as feel them drifting over you. That feeling is useful. It tells you that the scale is real. Imagine drawing the Milky Way as a broad disk on a table. Then imagine marking the Sun's location somewhere out in one spiral region, not at the center, not at the edge, just in a quieter middle distance. Already that mark would be tiny compared with the whole drawing. Then imagine trying to add Earth. Not Earth's orbit, just Earth. It would not be a second meaningful mark. It would not even be a dot on the Sun's dot. It would be hidden inside the idea of the solar system, itself hidden inside the location of one star, itself nearly lost inside the map of the galaxy. That is what tonight's question has been quietly leading toward. How small is Earth inside the Milky Way? So small that, on galactic scales, the planet is effectively invisible. And the strange thing is how peaceful that can feel once you stop resisting it. Because the galaxy does not need Earth to be large for Earth to be precious. A wedding ring is small. A seed is small. A page in a beloved book is small. Physical size is one kind of fact. Meaning is another. The Milky Way reduces Earth spatially, almost brutally, but it does not reduce the warmth of a room, the smell of rain, the sound of someone laughing in another part of the house, or the quiet relief of lying down at the end of a long day. Those things do not become less true because they happen on a very small planet. In some ways, they become more miraculous. The planet is tiny, yes, but tiny in a way that contains everything you know life to be. It also helps to remember that most of the galaxy is not filled with planets pressed together in a glittering crowd. The Milky Way is vast mostly because of the space between things. Between stars there is darkness, thin gas, drifting dust, magnetic fields, cosmic rays, and extraordinary emptiness. Even within spiral arms, the stars are separated by distances that make the solar system look like a private little whisper of structure. So Earth's smallness is not just about being physically little. It is about being physically little and deeply tucked away inside layers of separation. A world in orbit. Around one star. Among many stars. Inside one spiral galaxy. With more dark between those scales than the human mind finds polite. That layered hiddenness is part of the beauty. And if you try one more analogy, very softly, the galaxy begins to feel almost oceanic, not because it sloshes, but because its scale surrounds and exceeds you the way the sea exceeds a shell on the shore. Earth is that shell, beautiful, intricate, carrying a whole internal story, but minute compared with the body it rests within. The Milky Way is the larger setting that makes the shell look small and the shell's existence feel all the more delicate. There is also a humility in this that feels clean rather than harsh. Earth is not the center of the galaxy. The sun is not a special throne among stars. Our solar system is not a giant engine occupying some privileged district. We are part of the ordinary fabric of the Milky Way, hidden in it, carried by it. Made from elements forged in older stars, living under one present star, and measuring ourselves against a structure so broad that even our entire planetary system barely rises to the level of a notation. Which is rude, honestly, but also beautiful. And once you let that land, once you let the real scale settle without fighting to make yourself larger inside it, something soft happens. The galaxy stops feeling like an insult to human importance and starts feeling like a shelter for human smallness. Earth is not lost in the Milky Way the way a coin is lost under furniture. Earth is held in it, suspended in it, given one quiet orbit in one calm region of one enormous rotating home. That is why the next view feels less cold than you might expect. Because when you widen the frame once more, beyond single stars and even beyond the full map of Earth's place inside the galactic disk, you begin to notice that the Milky Way itself is also moving, also situated, also only one member of a larger gathering. And suddenly, our tiny world starts to shine not as something central, but as something tenderly local inside a universe that keeps opening without ever needing to rush. That widening frame does not stop at the edge of your local star field, or at the edge of the spiral arm, or even at the broad disk of the Milky Way itself. Once you have felt how small Earth is inside the galaxy, there is a very quiet temptation to think the journey is complete. Surely that is enough perspective for one evening. Surely the universe has made its point and can stop being so theatrically large. But the Milky Way, for all its grandeur, is not sitting alone in some private darkness. It is moving. That fact arrives softly, almost shyly, because nothing in your room suggests motion on that scale. The air feels still. The walls are still. The ordinary objects of life remain where you left them. And yet the galaxy that contains the sun, the solar system, Earth, and every human memory ever made is gliding through space as part of a larger gathering of galaxies. Even the Milky Way has a neighborhood. This is the next calmness. Scale keeps nesting inside scale. The Milky Way belongs to a small collection of galaxies called the local group. There are more than 50 known members, though most are little dwarf galaxies, modest and faint compared with the larger ones. The two great presences in this gathering are the Milky Way and the Andromeda Galaxy, with the Triangulum Galaxy joining them as another significant spiral member. Around these larger galaxies drift many smaller companions, gravitationally bound, carried along in a slow shared dance. It helps to be gentle with that image. This is not a crowded ballroom. It is more like a wide, dark plain with a few lanterns moving very slowly in relation to one another, each lantern containing hundreds of billions of stars. Andromeda is the nearest major spiral galaxy to us. Its light has been traveling for about 2.5 million years to reach Earth. That means when you see Andromeda, even faintly, you are seeing it as it was long before human civilization took its present shape. Before cities as you know them, before writing in many of its forms, before all the ordinary modern noise. That old light arrives anyway, quietly, crossing the dark with no interest in being dramatic about it. There is something deeply soothing in that patience. The Milky Way and Andromeda are moving toward each other and are expected to interact and eventually merge over billions of years. That sounds violent when stated too bluntly, but on those timescales the word almost loses its ordinary meaning. Galaxies are mostly space. Stars are so widely separated that direct stellar collisions during a merger are actually unlikely. What changes most is the overall structure. The great spiral forms distort. Streams of stars are pulled into new shapes. Gas clouds interact. New waves of star formation may ignite. And over immense time, the two galaxies settle into a new, larger system. It is less like two solid objects crashing and more like two vast luminous swarms slowly rearranging under gravity, which is still wonderfully rude to any hope that the cosmos might keep still for your convenience. But for now, the Milky Way remains itself, a spiral galaxy moving within the local group, and the local group itself is part of something even larger. It lies within a broader region often described as the Virgo supercluster in older language, though current mapping places us more specifically within a vast structure called Laniakea, a huge collection of galaxy groups and clusters linked by the large-scale flow of matter. Even those terms, grand as they sound, are really just labels humans place on patterns that become visible once the map grows wide enough. The universe keeps forming structure. Stars gather into galaxies. Galaxies gather into groups. Groups gather into larger structures. And between them lie enormous voids, regions where matter is thinner and galaxies are fewer. On the largest scales we can observe, the cosmos resembles a kind of web, with clusters and filaments stretching across great distances and emptier spaces between them. Not a web spun by intent, not a design arranged for us, just gravity and time shaping matter into patterns. And somewhere inside all of that, there is Earth. At this point, the smallness becomes almost gentle enough to hold without strain. Earth is tiny inside the Milky Way. The Milky Way is one galaxy among others in the local group. The local group is one modest gathering within a larger cosmic structure. But instead of making home feel meaningless, that layering begins to make it feel sheltered, like a small, warm room inside a vast winter landscape. The room does not need to be large to be enough. In fact, its smallness is part of what makes it dear. You begin to see why the night sky can feel both humbling and intimate at the same time. The stars are not close friends leaning over your shoulder. They are far away, often absurdly far away. The galaxy is not centered on you. The universe is under no obligation to make your life feel grand in physical terms, and yet you are allowed this one astonishing local place. This one tiny world with liquid oceans and oxygen-rich air and clouds moving over mountains and cities lighting up at dusk. This one world where matter learned to look up and notice the scale around it. That may be the tenderest part of the whole journey. Because Earth is not only small, it is aware, through you and through every mind that has ever wandered beneath the sky. The Milky Way contains hundreds of billions of stars, and as far as you know, only on worlds like this one does the galaxy become something that can be thought about, described, sung about, painted, worried over, and loved. The stars shine whether anyone notices or not, but here, on this tiny planet, they are seen. Seen by ancient eyes that imagined stories in them. Seen by navigators crossing dark seas. Seen by children asking impossible questions. Seen by tired adults stepping outside for 1 minute of air. Seen by you tonight while the world grows quieter around you. That does not make Earth bigger in size. It makes it warmer in meaning. And that warmth matters, because once you leave behind the need for central importance, once you no longer need Earth to be the hub of the cosmos, you can appreciate something subtler. Our world is local, provincial even, a small hidden place in a quiet part of one galaxy among many, but it is full of texture and consciousness and weather and memory. It is the place where your life actually happens, not in the galactic center, not in the local group, not in the broad architecture of cosmic filaments. Here, on a tiny surface under a thin atmosphere, while one ordinary star moves through one ordinary corner of the Milky Way. And with that thought, the vastness begins to stop pressing outward and starts folding inward instead, becoming a kind of calm around home, a deep surrounding silence that makes the little blue world feel less exposed and more gently held, as though all this immense structure exists not to diminish it, but to cradle its brief brightness for a while longer before the night grows even softer. That soft surrounding silence stays with you, and after all the distance, all the scaling down, all the quiet reductions from planet to orbit to star to spiral arm to galaxy, something very gentle begins to happen. Earth stops feeling small in the lonely sense. It stops feeling like a thing that has been diminished. Instead, it starts to feel like something carefully contained, something brief and luminous resting inside a structure so vast that it no longer needs to compete with it. You have traveled outward in thought until the familiar world nearly disappeared into proportion. You watched oceans become a thin film, mountains become surface texture, the atmosphere become a delicate blue whisper. You watched Earth turn into one small companion around one ordinary star. Then the sun itself joined a wider crowd. Then that crowd took its place inside the Milky Way, and the Milky Way moved into an even larger dark full of other galaxies, an older light and distance so patient it no longer feels harsh. And after all that, here you are again. Not back at the beginning, back with a different kind of seeing. Because the point was never to make your life feel tiny in a cruel way. The point was to let scale do something kind to you, to loosen the grip of all the little things that spend the day pretending to be enormous. The message you forgot to answer, the awkward conversation that keeps replaying, the task waiting for tomorrow morning with its dull little urgency. Under the Milky Way, those things do not become fake. They just return to their true size, manageable, local, temporary, very sincere perhaps, but not cosmic. And that is such a relief. Earth is small inside the Milky Way, completely, beautifully small, a hidden world in a quiet part of the galaxy, circling an ordinary star that itself is one among hundreds of billions. The planet has no grand central throne. It is not spotlighted from the galactic core. It is not announced with fanfare across the stars. It is tucked into one minor spur, one calm district, one unobtrusive address in a barred spiral galaxy that turns with no interest in applause, which somehow makes home feel even more intimate. You can almost sense the gentleness of that placement now. A quieter neighborhood, a stable orbit, a thin atmosphere holding warmth and weather close to the surface, liquid water gathering into oceans, time passing slowly enough for life to become complicated, reflective, and strangely tender. On this small planet, molecules became cells, cells became creatures, creatures became minds, and minds learned to look out into the dark and ask how large the dark might be. That is a beautiful thing for a tiny world to do. It means Earth is not important because it is big. It is important because it is full of process, full of living systems and memory and perception, full of wind moving through trees and moonlight on rooftops and rainwater finding gutters and voices in different languages under the same sky, full of music heard from the next room, full of grief and kindness and ordinary evenings, full of people who will never meet each other, all standing on the same small sphere while it turns through darkness with exquisite steadiness. That steadiness matters. The Earth spins, the Earth orbits, the sun moves through the galaxy moves through a larger structure. Motion is everywhere, and yet your life is allowed these still moments inside it. A chair by a window, a bed cooling slowly under the night air, a fan turning somewhere nearby, a person breathing in the dark while a whole galaxy carries them without a sound. There is almost something parental about that in the widest possible sense. Not in the sense that the universe is looking after you personally with a clipboard and a plan. More in the sense that reality is broad enough to hold you without effort. You do not need to be large for existence to make room for you. You already fit. Your whole world fits. Earth, for all its oceans and weather and cities and histories, fits easily inside the Milky Way, and the Milky Way fits inside something wider still. So perhaps being small is not the insult the ego first imagines. Perhaps being small is what allows tenderness. A small lamp warms a room. A small harbor shelters boats. A small hand can calm a frightened child. A small planet can carry an entire living world. That is the mood settling in now. Not insignificance, intimacy. Earth is not grand in scale, but it is astonishing in detail. The galaxy does not erase that detail. It protects it by giving it context. It says, here is a vast place, and within it, here is one quiet world where clouds move over oceans and living things dream. And if you hold the image one last time, very softly, you can feel the full balance of it. The Milky Way is immense beyond ordinary feeling, and Earth is almost invisibly small inside it. Both of those things are true, but the smallness of Earth is exactly what makes its warmth feel so concentrated. All known human love, effort, memory, art, hunger, comfort, laughter, and longing gathered onto one tiny surface under one thin atmosphere. A little bright layer on a rocky world, hidden in a side street of the galaxy. A side street, yes, but full of light. So tonight, when you think of Earth inside the Milky Way, you do not have to picture a lonely speck abandoned in blackness. You can picture a very small home carried gently through a very large structure. You can picture the galaxy not as a threat to your importance, but as the vast calm around your local life. A surrounding greatness that asks nothing from you except honesty about scale and maybe a little wonder before sleep. And that is enough. The night does not need to prove anything else. The stars do not need to come closer. Earth does not need to be bigger. It only needs to be what it is. A tiny world. A living world. A quiet world from far away. And from here, the only world that has ever held you. So the frame can stay wide now. It can stay beautifully, impossibly wide. You can leave the Milky Way overhead in all its patient enormity and still rest inside the fact that home, though small, is real. The bed beneath you is real. The room around you is real. The breathing in your chest is real. And all of it is happening on a planet so little inside the galaxy that it almost disappears, yet so full from within that it contains entire lives. That is the final calmness. You are small and held. Earth is small and held. Even this little world, hidden in the Milky Way, belongs. And with that thought, the journey can grow quieter still. For a moment, let everything become softer. Let the galaxy remain far away and enormous, just as it is, a pale river of uncountable stars turning slowly through the dark. Let the sun become once again the familiar star that will rise in its own time. Let Earth return to its gentler scale, not as a measurement now, but as a home. Feel the room around you settling. Feel the weight beneath you being carried by the floor, the building, the ground, the planet itself. And far below thought, let the planet keep turning. Let the atmosphere rest around it like a thin blue hush. Let the oceans lie in the dark, breathing with the moon. Let the continents drift through night. Let cities dim, one window at a time. Let roads empty. Let voices fade. Let the long day loosen its hands. You do not need to hold the whole galaxy in your mind anymore. You only need the feeling of it. The feeling that there is a vastness beyond worry. The feeling that your world is small enough to be precious. The feeling that somewhere above the roof and the clouds and the quiet dark, the Milky Way continues in its patient silence, And that silence does not erase you. It holds you. So you can rest here on this tiny planet, in this tiny moment, on this tiny edge of a very great galaxy, and be completely enough. Nothing more is required. The stars can keep their distance. The universe can remain beautifully enormous. And you can simply be warm and still and safe.